Right. Okay. I'm going to kick things off, if that's all right, because we've got people arriving, but I'll get going. So evening, everyone, and welcome to the latest Low Traffic Future webinar. We're really pleased that you could join us tonight. For those of you who may be new to Low Traffic Future, we're an alliance of individuals and organizations calling for transformative change in how roads, streets, and transport networks are planned, and housing as well, which you'll learn about tonight. Our vision is simple. We want it to be easy and enjoyable to get around by walking, wheeling, cycling, and for public and shared transport to be cheaper and more accessible. We've recently been focusing on how best to support local groups. Because we know that's where much of the real change is going to happen, or we hope will happen. We're here to help groups make the case for reducing car dependence in two important contexts in the coming months. First, in the run-up to May's local elections, and second, in shaping the new generation of local transport plans. Just a little bit of housekeeping tonight. We had well over 100 people register, which is too many cameras and microphones, so it's a webinar only, really. And Google's chat feature isn't too great, so what I'm going to use is an app called Slido. So I'll put a link in the chat straight after this, but if you take a picture of that QR code or scan it with your phone, it will take you to the website where you can, as Jenny is talking, ask questions, and kind of give thumbs up and down to other questions, so that we can hopefully have put some questions to Jenny and Roger later on. So please do use that if you can. We'll be finished by 7 o'clock at the latest. And as I said right at the start, we are recording this event too, so I'll share that with everyone who's registered in the coming days. So let's get started with tonight's topic. I will stop sharing that. Really delighted to introduce our speaker, Jenny Raggett of Transport for New Homes. Transport for New Homes was one of the original founding members of Low Traffic Future, I think. We're really grateful to have Jenny here and to share her years of experience on transport and housing campaigning. Jenny, I'm going to hand over to you if you want to say more about who you are, and then dive straight into your presentation. As I say, we're going to have 20 minutes, 25 minutes of Jenny running her through her slides, and then we're going to have a nice long Q&A at the end. But Jenny, that's enough for me, and over to you, if that's all right.
I'm just hoping it's all going to work. Yeah, I'm trying to share my presentation. Can you see it?
We can see it. I think you just need to click the
full screen in a minute. Yeah, I'm Jenny Raggett from Transport for New Homes. So we really are trying to bring sustainable transport into the planning picture, which is very difficult, as we have found. And a lot of our work involves actually real life visits to new housing estates to see what's going on, how people are travelling and what's being built. And we've got a lot of reports which you can read. Just a minute, I'm trying to see how to do this. Right, I'll try and start. See what happens. Yep, has that worked?
It has, yeah. It could do making it a little bit bigger, Jenny. There should be a present button somewhere. Where is it? I think if you click slideshow at the top, because we're still seeing.
I don't know. Slideshow at the top. No, stop presenting. I'm not actually sure. I may have to just leave it. I don't want to stop anything.
No, it's fine. Go on. If you're happy as it is and clicking through, yeah, fire away.
Through it. I think I have to go. Just a minute. I'm honestly not sure about this. Wait a minute.
If you'd prefer,
go back again. I'm going back.
No worries.
I'm going back again and see if I have done something wrong. Otherwise, you'll have to do it. So share screen. It worked the other day. Window. Just a minute. I know what I've got to do. If I do, sorry about this, slideshow. Slideshow. Slideshow from the start. Right. No, that's not going to work.
Would you like me to share it on your?
I don't think it's worth working. Well, I mean, if you could do it.
Yeah, I think we should be straight into it. There you go. Can you see that?
Just wait. Yeah, that's better. Sorry.
No worries. You carry on. Just tell me when you need me to click through.
So anyway, so that's an introduction to Transport for New Homes, what we do, promote planning around sustainable transport and so on. We also review local plans, planning applications, we get involved at critiquing master plans and so on. Right, next, I think I have to ask for next. So this is about planning and transport and tackling car-dependent new housing. And as you can see, one of the things not allowed in most of the places we visit, or rather not catered for, is travel by tram. In Europe, when we've visited new homes, the tram is a quite common option. Anyway, we'll come to that later. Next one. So trending now. This is what we've seen. You can look on Google, you'll see it. This is what's happening. Successive layers of car-based outer suburbs, further and further out of town, built around road systems, driving lifestyles embedded, and hundreds of thousands of future homes risk being built to this model. So that's the New England as we have observed it around everywhere we go. Next. So why is this happening? Well, we wanted to know what the planning machinery was that gives us more sprawl around roads and the car and this US lifestyle. So we asked the question. And next one. So central, next. Ooh. Next. So one of the things which maybe people don't realize is that at the heart of the machinery that decides where we're going to build and how much is an algorithm. And this algorithm is called various things, including housing need calculation. And you can read about it, you can actually look at the algorithm on the MHCLG website. What it does, it takes all the houses that we need and then distributes them across England using a really simple piece of arithmetic. And it doesn't take into account job density, which is crazy, nor public transport, biodiversity, water, brownfield sites, etc. So if you look at this algorithm, you can see that it relates to the number of homes actually there to start with, the dwelling stock, and then it requires in the future more based on the ratio of the average house price in the local authority, in the whole local authority, and the average workplace salary. So in places where there's a disparity between earnings and the cost of an average house, you will have to build a lot more housing. And there's a comment in the side that in this world of AI and data, why is such a simple algorithm being used? Well, I mean, that's a good question. Next. So, I mean, just, you know, as an example, because I live in the Southwest, you know, just some, if people are interested, I mean, I think, yeah, Wiltshire, 3,500 homes per annum required. Well, that is an awful lot in what is essentially a rural county. And, you know, this is posing a problem. You know, we're not saying you don't need homes, but we are asking why build them in rural areas where public transport is particularly poor. And, you know, that's something we've highlighted in our blogs on our website. Next one. So this baseline housing need, which results from the algorithm, is then the basis of the local plan. So for those who don't know, it's a blueprint for the next 15 years for the local planning authority must produce. And it's about land use predominantly. So it's not about how the place will work, really. It's about what's going to be built, particularly in the way of housing. And it has aspirational policies on transport, and this is where the local transport plan does come into it. But if you want to, you really, you know, it's worth understanding the local plan process, and chapter 3 of the National Planning Policy Framework will tell you everything. Anyway, next. After the first stage in producing a plan is a call for sites. And this is where things get interesting, because if you, in Europe, the planners in the European countries we visited, the planners decide where best to build. So they will look and they'll say, right, there's a lot of new jobs here. We really have got a high demand for future housing. Here is the town, the city. Where is it best to build in consideration of everything? Environment, transport, the lot. So it's a holistic approach. Whereas in England, the call for sites is to developers and promoters of land in general. And they come up with all sorts of serving suggestions, quite often in places which will end up car-based. And there is something called the Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment, which discusses what has been proposed and what should be selected for inclusion in the plan. Right, next. So this is what's called site sifting. And at this stage, you might be alarmed. You say, oh my God, they're thinking of building a new enormous housing development north of Dorchester, for example. Why has that been selected? Well, quite likely because it's large, promises a lot of units. If you think of these new homes as a product, I suppose, of lots of units. And it's been put forward by major companies, so it's a reliable bet that it will be built. And people often say, well, what about the smaller sites? Well, these are often considered windfall sites that may come forward but might not. Anyway, there is at this stage some kind of assessment of sites, but it's not really in depth. And it might include things like traffic and accessibility, but it's it's not done in any detail. Next one. Successful sites go into something called the issues and option consultation, and there will be a transport topic paper. And as you can see, some people would say, well, this is very exciting. Let's see. So maybe there'll be a map of the metro or the tram system that's going to support all this massive growth. Maybe it will go across border even and show a wider public transport network, but probably not. The trouble is that the building of that kind of infrastructure has to be well on the way or certain in order to go into the land use plan, the local plan. And if it's not, which is often the case, well, you won't see it. There may be a couple of policies to indicate it might be, but this is the problem. The allocation of strategic housing sites does not run parallel to the construction of really good local public transport networks, which happens more in Europe. Next. So at that point, you as campaigners, members of the public, are invited to comment. Even at this stage, it's really important in our experience to take the trouble to comment systematically and read all the different papers that have come out with this options for the local plan. You might think, oh, but it's way into the future. This doesn't really matter. But the thing about local plans is that, yes, they happen gradually, but they do happen. And if you've put in comments right at the beginning, you will be part of the circuit. When the planning inspectorate eventually looks and considers it, you will be there and you will be asked, if you want to attend the planning inquiry. Right, next. One of the things you really need to acquaint yourself for this big game, which I'm afraid it begins to feel like, is the National Planning Policy Framework. It's written in a really clever way, I have to say, which is careful use of language, which sounds useful at first, but can be interpreted in a different way. So people are quite keen to see that significant development should be focused on locations which are or can be made sustainable through limiting the need to travel or offering a general choice of transport modes. But what does that actually mean? Because we've seen very large urban extensions in places which clearly are difficult to argue as, you know, offering a real, genuine choice of transport modes. But somehow, you know, the developers will try and say that it is possible. Bus services may be suggested, but for how long, how frequent, to what quality, how will they be integrated with the actual housing estate, the layout, the density of the housing estate, will that really work for public transport, and so on. So there's a lot of questions that people like us might ask, but the way that the NPPF is phrased, it doesn't get to the crux of the matter. It remains rather abstract. Next one. Yeah. So after this initial option consultation, you've got these rather weirdly named Regulation 18 and 19 stages. So Regulation 18 is the sort of draft of the local plan, the official draft that now goes out to consultation. You must respond again, and there'll be a box that says, do you want to appear at the public inquiry? And it would be great if a lot of campaigners did, because that's where the action can be. But you need to respond to the Regulation 18 and then to the Regulation 19. There's so much work involved, but that's the final draft of the plan, which will go to the Planning Inspectorate. Now, there is so much work involved, and in my opinion, it's really essential to form an alliance of local groups to respond to the local plan. And certainly the Planning Inspectorate will prefer it, because then you've got a whole load of people articulating a single voice, and then he can get the idea of what you mean. So that's why that's put in there. And you may need to get expertise at this stage so that your representations look professional. Right, next. So one of the things you can do when you respond to local plans is almost to play the inspector. So you can pose questions to highlight your concerns and then answer them. So I just thought of some: whether the housing locations are sustainably located, at the right density, the right urban form, will there be frequent high quality buses, whether the infrastructure delivery plan, or you might want to look at the local transport plan, whichever it is. Your question is, does it identify, I don't know, station upgrades, potential new stations, cycle networks, tram and light rail routes, heaven forbid, to support the large-scale housing sites? So, you know, you've got to show the inspector what you're talking about. Somebody has once said to me, the inspector knows nothing, you've got to teach them. So when you respond to a local plan, that's what you've got to do. What evidence is there that vision-led planning approach is enshrined in the choice of housing allocations? Well, that sounds like a proper examination question, but vision-led is the latest buzzword, so you might be interested in using it and arguing about it. Right, next one. Finally, a planning inspector calls. The cartoon doesn't show how big they are, but you can see that the council is there, there's the campaigner, the developers will be there with their legal teams, because they've got some very large projects that they want to make sure go into the local plan with the right policies. And His Majesty's Planning Inspectorate, there will be the inspector, maybe two, and there'll be round the table discussions focused on questions which the the planning inspector will put forward, and they will be specific, and there will be a transport day or more than a transport day. And this is where more time has to be taken to answer the questions, the matters, I think they're called, posed by the inspector, so that he says, oh yeah, or she, yeah, these people know what they're talking about. I'd like to hear from them around the table. And you will then be pitted against the council, or you can join with the council, and you may be making points against the developers, or even supporting developers, as we have on occasion. And get to know the programme officer early. Sorry about noise. Get to know the programme officer early. The programme officers like the secretary, and they're really helpful, and they will help you stick to the formal procedure, which will put you in the inspector's good books. Next one. After the plan, adoption of the plan, yeah, after the examination in public, there may be major and minor modifications by the inspector that have to be put in. And then there it is, the plan, and the big sites will come forward, and there'll be planning applications. Worth knowing that a lot of people, and this, I've just found this recently, a lot of local authorities have not got a recently adopted plan in the last 5 years. And this is a real worry for those local authorities. And I think that the dark turquoisey green, well, it shows that a lot of local authorities are in that position. And from a planning point of view, it's quite dangerous. Right, next one. If the plan's out of date, then another door may be open for developers of these big out-of-town housing estates. So the rule is, roughly speaking, bear in mind that everything I say is rather a simplification of a very complicated planning system. Where a plan is out of date, the housing trajectory, if the housing trajectory is low, or the 5-year housing land supply falling short, now that means allocated sites for 5 years worth of housing in that local authority area. If it's, say, 2.5 years, because the local plan is out of date or they're having problems, then the National Planning Policy Framework moves towards the presumption of sustainable development. And this is called the tilted balance. And there you can see that housing, even if there are environmental disbenefits or other considerations, the balance may very well be tilted in the favour of permission. Next one. So we had one of these locally in Somerset, Wiltshire borders. It was called, it's called the Selwood Garden Community. It was put in exactly in these circumstances where the local plan was out of date and the 5-year housing land supply made low, partly because of the incredible increase recently in the housing target for Somerset. So obviously, if you've got to build, well, anyway, that's one of the contributing factors. So here it was, 1,700 homes on 1 kilometre of countryside near Frome, access primarily from the bypass, 4,000 spaces for cars, people estimated, poor public transport in the area, hundreds of documents by consultants, literally seems to go on and on forever, paid for by the developer, as there were so many environmental impacts. I think there's 9 kilometres of hedges, 4.5 kilometres of country lanes, of the river Frome, lots of veteran trees, and cut off from the town, a long way to walk. However, it was refused by Somerset Council, but it was called in by the Secretary of State. I believe, when was it called in?
The 3rd of February. On
the 3rd of February, there we go, this year. I have next to me someone who knows about these things. And there was a public inquiry in the summer. Somerset Council, although they had refused permission, they were forced by the cost of legal participation in the public inquiry to be neutral. And that really made a difference, as did the fact that local campaigners, and there were lots of different groups against this, failed to unite with what's called Rule 6. Under Rule 6, as a party, as a particular party with representation, they kind of did a do-it-yourself job rather than a formal Rule 6 role. And that made it even easier for the developer to take control at the public inquiry and put forward their case. And us campaigners were reduced to minimal participation, even though I think the planning inspector was very good in trying to involve us, I have to say. But there are procedures, and you have to adhere to them. It is a kind of quasi-court scene after all. Next one. This just takes us briefly to road building. A lot of these housing, new housing sites, garden communities, real ones or ones with have just taken on the name, as in this case of the Selwood Garden Community, they come with these new bypasses or new roads, distributor roads, all this kind of thing. And when the planning application goes in, you really need an expert to look at the transport assessment. These transport assessments are, well, the ones we've looked at, 90% around traffic modelling, which is a technical exercise, and you need somebody who knows what they're doing to work it all out. This diagram, which actually comes from one of our reports, shows the various stages. But what it is that you model the transport network before and after on the basis of how many extra cars are going to be using it. And on that basis, you decide to unblock it at the various pinch points. Vision-led planning, which is newly in the National Planning Policy Framework, is meant to go against this way of dealing things. And actually, we have challenged this in the Selwood Garden Community on the basis of vision-led planning and transport. And we'll see if it actually holds any water, or whether this old-fashioned approach is perfectly pucker even today. Next one. A station. Lots of developers say they're going to put new stations on the way or will be built. They say that there is a station that can serve the development, but quite often it's a very small station. It's a long way away. The trains are very infrequent. And, one needs to ask a lot of questions about this and make the points. So this mountainous landscape of opening up a new station, and we did just because it is a very long process, and developers may get everyone excited about the new station and blah, 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 but in fact, it's not that simple. Next one. All change, having spoken about aspects of the planning system now and local plans, under devolution, planning is changing in the future. So, as it explained, well, I must admit, it's not my expertise. I've tried to sum up what I can find, but it looks as though all strategic authorities, including all mayoral and non-mayoral combined authorities, will have to produce a spatial development strategy. And that once adopted, this becomes part of the sort of development plan for a wider area. Local plans seem to go on, but they will need to be in conformity with the spatial development strategy. And I think I've seen this before when I was on the Regional Assembly, Southwest Regional Assembly, that you have an overall plan, but the individual local plans are supposed to all be in conformity with the overall plan. Next one. Yeah, new local plans. I mean, this is much as I could find at the moment. Concentrated on site or area specific allocations. Well, that's similar. Broader development policies to be handled nationally. So that's different. The local plans at the moment have a lot of individual policies about all kinds of environmental things. So it looks as though those might be handled nationally. More interesting maybe is the use of digital mapping and data. And I really wonder whether, with the use of digital mapping and data, whether some more intelligent planning is on the way when it comes to land use, density, and where we build and what we build. That's open. I've no idea. One would hope so. So cooperation between local authorities and strategic oversight is going to be on a higher level, but I really haven't understood what that means. Whether it means that you could finally cooperate across a whole area and build a metro and then coordinate all the housing around it, and then decide and specify a cycle network as well. I don't know, but I have my doubts. Next one, is there one more? Yes, well, that's what I've more or less just said. How new mass transit systems read out to new development areas, new homes to be coordinated rather than scattered as CalPAC developments. Can we use the changes to engineer a different way of building, more akin to the new places being built in the Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, spelled wrong, and France? There we go. Okay, is that the last one? Oh, an example. I wasn't sure I'd included that. An example of a different way of building when you consider those sprawling car-based suburbs that we're still doing here. This is just where we went to in Sweden. Low-rise apartments built around different public green spaces. There were loads of people walking, cycling, and taking public transport. There was this concept of proximity of population, and with that came all the local shops, local supermarkets, cafes, good public transport, and so on. And I did ask about whether people had cars, and I was shown the basement of one of these low-rise apartment areas. And there were some cars there, but as the guy said, you don't really need a car here. And anyway, there are car clubs. So that was, and I think the other photo is me outside a cafe in the basement. It's all literally a few minutes away. Right, is that the final one, or have I put something? Oh, the advertisement is the final one. Yes, so I work with Steve Chambers at Transport for New Homes, and this is a quick advertisement for the Transport Knowledge Wiki. If you put those words into Google, you will see it. It's an entire database of really useful research material and other publications associated with public transport and walking, cycling, sustainable transport, the lot. So please do use it because it's great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jenny. I'll make sure that that link is included in the notes that gets sent around to everyone. Sounds really good. I'll try and put it in the chat before the end of the meeting as well. Let me stop sharing that, and Roger might want to come in as well. So yeah, thanks so much. That was really interesting. And well, personally, actually, I found that a lot of it quite well on Wirral, where I am. We've been through all this stuff. We've just had a fairly recently adopted local plan that went through the mill over the last few years. And we've got the SDS, the Spatial Development Strategy at the Liverpool City region level that I'm trying to get my head around as well. So yeah, really, really interesting. I know Roger's been at a planning conference all day, so he's either absolutely exhausted and not able to contribute, or yeah, or he's got a head full of stuff he can discuss. So we've had quite a few questions come in on Slido. Keep them coming, folks listening, if you can. Before I get to those, I'm interested, Jenny, have you given much thought as to why the UK seems to be so bad at this stuff historically, like post-war? Is there a reason why we're doing things differently to our European friends?
I mean, I'm thinking about that. It's very interesting. Lots of people say, "Oh well, we're very American. We want our own house. We've always been told that owning your house is it, and we like our little houses, and we don't like apartments." So the trouble is, if that's the case, then inevitably you're going to have people spaced apart out of town, and I suppose they will want to drive, because we don't build the mass transit systems that you see in Europe. You know, when you have a look, if you just look at, as I think it's a map, you can find it, just type in something like European tram and light rail systems. We're a very populated country. We've got the same density of population practically as the Netherlands, but we just have failed to connect everybody together by local public transport. We just don't seem to get it. And anyway, that's one of the things. The other thing is that we
go for our individual little gardens, not the communal.
Yes,
which safe space.
Yeah, there is a difference. I mean, I have lived in Europe, and I do know it's a different perspective. But my argument is that increasingly people would like a lovely, spacious flat rather than have to go and move out into the sticks, own 2 cars. They'd like to be. A lot of young people would, I think, prefer that life. And certainly I met English people who'd moved to Kungsängen in Sweden. They loved it. And, you know, they had more space. It was sociable. So there's some kind of, it's almost a marketing exercise to show the major house builds we could do things differently. Anyway, I think that's too long an explanation, but yeah.
No, well, we could spend hours talking about
Yeah,
this. Roger, I want to bring you in, Roger, if it's all right. Just if you had any initial thoughts on the
prattle a lot, but I'll just sort of offer some thoughts on that. Why do we get it wrong? Because as you rightly said, it's something I've been thinking about right from the day. Little list of them. Firstly, as Jenny alluded to several of them, but firstly the point that the planning system is led by the developers rather than local authority planners. Then the developers, obviously they follow their business model. They know how to build a full 2-story car dependent developments on a countryside. So they do what's easy. The rules of the game then don't support the local authorities who might actually want to try and do the right thing, but they are undermined by all sorts of, the national planning policy framework that Jenny mentioned. It makes it very hard for even a local authority that wants to refuse a car-dependent development. There's one paragraph 116 in the national planning policy framework that makes it very hard for the local authority to refuse a car-dependent development in the wrong place. And then, as Jenny mentioned, there's that algorithm that distributes an awful lot of homes to the wrong place, to places which do not have good public transport and never will do. Add to that an under-resourced planning system where local authority planners, there are few of them. It's a profession that their politicians love tearing into planners. It's a demoralising thing. You're under-resourced and everyone hates you. It's not a nice place to try and do the right thing, So so there's. And then the last point is that split between transport planning being one in many parts of England, being the county council, and land use planning being the planning authority, the district councils. So there's an awful lot of factors that make it very hard for people to do the right thing. Now, Jenny mentioned this whole government reorganisation, the creation of combined authorities, which will be responsible both for a local transport plan and for that spatial development strategy that Jenny just mentioned, is an opportunity to deal with the last of those problems, namely the fact that transport planning and land use planning are currently split. So if I were to sort of highlight, Jenny's key lessons, getting early, there's actually now this opportunity to get in early at the level of the local transport plan and/or the spatial development strategy as and when they start to come through. So I'd really reiterate Jenny's point about getting early, getting at the policy level rather than waiting for individual schemes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. We just had a question come out. She's asked if it's being recorded, and yes, it is. I'll answer that one right now. So we're recording. Apologies for Roger's microphone, but yeah, not too bad, Roger. You're still saying some very useful stuff, so we'll hang in there. A question, I don't know if it's too specific. This one, it might be a Roger one actually, but someone's asked is if Manual for Streets version 3 apparently about to be consulted on, can it change 80 years of designing for cars and congestion? Yeah, do you think that's going to make any difference? Is that something, Jenny, you know much about Manual for Streets, or is that a Roger question?
I certainly, I haven't looked at the latest version to see if it's changed. I think Roger should answer that.
I have no idea about the latest version, but it's one of many things that has been imminent for about 5 years. I was in my previous job at Cycling UK, I was shown a draft that was like 95% certain to get out the door a few months later, and it still hasn't 5 years later, along with the Integrated National Transport Strategy, the Transport Planning Guidance, the pavement parking review, and a whole load of things that are just bottlenecked in the Department of Transport. So will it make a difference? I don't know. I wouldn't want to bank on it. It's worth reflecting that the local, for those of you who do sort of cycle policy stuff, the local transport note, transport note 1/20, the one that defines what's good cycling infrastructure, it would not have happened had Andrew Gilligan not been in number 10 Downing Street as Boris Johnson's right-hand man on transport stuff. It's very rare to get a document that is as prescriptive, that is as clear in what local authorities need to do to conform to it. And I rather fear that Manual for Streets will not be as prescriptive. One of the things that came out of the conference is an appeal for one of the speakers I thought was absolutely spot on. We just need some clear rules of the game. The developers, they'll all say they'll do whatever it takes to get planning permission. If they're told to do the right thing, they'll do the right thing to get planning permission. But if the government then doesn't give clear rules of the road, then they will exploit the loopholes. They will look for that local authority that hasn't got an up-to-date plan and an up-to-date 5-year land supply, because that's the easy way to get planning permission.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No. I see those questions.
Go on, Jenny. You know, if you want.
I was going to just add the other big force is deliverability. Right. This word, you know, the local authorities may very well not like what they have to do, but they are under pressure to make sure that sites in the local plan are deliverable, and what that means will be built. And that's such a big pressure that the locations chosen mean that all of these other documents with all of these sound advice about sustainable transport and density and how we should shape things, everything is almost irrelevant because we've gone for completely the wrong location. And I was on a meeting yesterday, which was the Transport Planning Society, on travel plans. And at some point, somebody who does these did say, if the location is completely wrong, even a travel plan will struggle to have any effect. And I think that's very telling, you know, a bit. And so anyway, that, you know, and I can see that there are big brownfield sites next to stations even that still have not been built because they are difficult to build and sometimes not even included in local plans because they're not deliverable. And the local plan inspector is looking for certainty and soundness of plan. So there we are.
Okay, great. Yeah, we've had comments about Coventry and Leicester, yeah, with quite ambitious plans, but not much transport provision in there. So yeah, big concerns. We talked about the algorithm, and it's been raised in the questions. Is there any hope, Jenny? I mean, you kind of briefly said there might be hope in the sense that AI and big data might save us. Do you think it can, or is that just sort of?
Well, I mean, it just depends whether somebody I think there needs to be public pressure. I think it's actually fairly daft to have an algorithm which produces really insane, I mean, housing targets and tells local authorities off if they don't build to those targets. Well, essentially, you know, they're in trouble. without proper economic analysis even of where to build, or the environmental.
Don't look at the geography.
Yeah, it's done without geography. I mean, I spoke to the CPRE. Well, that's the guy who's who's now leading it.
Roger Moore.
Yeah, Mortlock. That's it, Roger Mortlock. I mean, I think they're onto it, but it's difficult to get the media interested. But it is a scandal, to my mind, that, you know, and other countries do it differently. They go, okay, so are we really sure that there's going to be economic growth where there's a housing shortage? And they ask questions like, who's looking for houses? Is it, and what kind of houses? This, you know, and all that. You would just think it would be done more intelligently with evidence and data to help. Anyway, yeah, I would hope so.
Jobs as well.
Mm.
Yeah, you would. Well, there's a question from Chris.
Sorry, on that one, on the algorithm before we move on. And apologies to the person who's asking, can I adjust my mic? I've been trying to work out what's wrong with it, and I still haven't found the answer. So sorry. I just have to bear with me. I'm sorry about that. But on the algorithm point, I think there is a sort of a kind of potential beacon of hope around the algorithm, which relates to that earlier point about government restructuring with the government moving to having combined authorities everywhere in England apart from Greater London, all being the strategic planning authorities responsible for writing a strategic development plan. Therefore, the opportunity is there for the government to distribute housing targets not to every small district council, but to the combined authorities. Now, the combined authorities, most of them are large enough to have at least one decent-sized city in them. So that if the algorithm sent housing allocations to the combined housing allocations to the combined authorities, there is a better chance that the combined authorities can concentrate the housing in places where it would be sensible. The government hasn't said that that's what it's going to do, but at least there is the opportunity for them to do so.
Mm.
Yeah. Although having said that, it will be interesting where local authorities, where there's a city area like Bath and Bristol, and then you've got maybe a combined authority that's got Wiltshire and Dorset, because the satellite towns are not in the same combined authority as the urban area. I bet that happens in other parts of the country. So yeah, but
we've been told, Roger, actually, that Manual for Streets 3 is going to be published for comment in 3 parts, with the first part coming 16th of December with comments by mid-Jan. So yeah, we'll watch out for that, and it's the type of thing we'll share with folks on our email list if it's something we think we can get people behind. So yeah, thank you for that. We've had a question from Chris Gillam asking, isn't the problem from the top? The DFT has never done transport in the sense of asking what our transport needs and how they are best met. Is it? Yeah, the DFT just not really involved in the housing thing, or what's the history there?
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be, well, first thing, weird thing about the DFT is that once looked at the organisational chart, and local transport's just one piece, small piece, and it hasn't got I mean, you would expect, wouldn't you, there to be a whole part of it involved in trams, light rail and metros. Surely at least some expertise. So I did go to a conference where I asked someone from the DFT, who is the person I would speak to in the DFT about light rail and trams and local and housing. And they said, I don't know if we've got anybody, which I thought was very telling. And that in London, of course, it's done differently, but I think, there's a much more of a transport and planning come together. But I do think that, I don't really get it. DFT seems to be not really working with MHCLG, with the housing people, to coordinate housing and transport together in the way that is done in Europe. Doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, no, I'd echo that last point about, I think the problem isn't wholly squarely to be pinned on DFT. I think it's an interaction between the Department of Transport and Transport and the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, which is responsible for all the planning policy. Now, I'll come back to DFT. MHCLG, they're both for whatever reasons, under-resourced departments and are failing to get things out of the door. The planning, MHCLG has obviously had planning legislation going through. DFT has sort of managed to get through a sort of a railways bill and is coming up with a second one and a buses bill. And those are the things that Labour said in opposition that they were going to do. And DFT seems to have managed to gear up for the things they were told about before the general election. There's failed to get anything else out the door. The integrated national transport strategy, that long list of things that seem to be bottlenecked in DFT. One thing to their credit they have done, which we should have touched on, is they've delivered this thing called the connectivity tool, which I think is actually a really important kind of big white hope here. So the connectivity tool is it's a means of assessing whether a potential development site is is it well located in terms of being accessible by walking, by cycling, by public transport to the places where you need to get to? They've unfortunately they've only really made it available to local authorities. You can log in if you've got a .gov.uk email address, but they've not made it available to volunteers. They haven't even made it available to developers. In fact, the reason they not made it available to us is because they want the developers to have to pay for it. So we don't get access to it either, which is unfortunate. And they are thinking about whether they can provide a light version for the public, so that at least the public can use this to engage with the process of saying, well, look, this location has a good connectivity score. It should be in the plan. That location should not, because it's got a terrible connectivity score. So it's a potentially there was a lot of discussion of it during the conference I've just been to, and not just how can we use it to assess individual sites, but also how to set some policies in local transport plans. And I'd urge any of you who've got a local transport plan coming up to say, dear Transport Authority, please include some targets or indicators for the proportion of new homes that have a connectivity score of 60% or more. I don't quite know whether that's the right number to choose, but I hope you get the point that we should be pushing for policies that say we need housing to be located in places with high connectivity using this new connectivity tool.
Can I just say on that, Max, it's quite amusing, really, that at the Selwood Garden Community big inquiry, I think I was allowed 2 questions, and one of them was waiving a map generated by said connectivity tool, because one of our directors works for Transport for London. We just played around to see. I waived it and I said, are you aware that the DFT connectivity shows that actually this is a very poor area when it comes to accessibility and very poor public transport? And that was the end of my question. I wasn't allowed to say any more, but the developer had to say, we have not got access to that. But I said, well, it's here. But their response, and this is the critical thing, is that that may be true, but on balance, when you consider the benefits of this development in terms of housing against the harm or the problems that have been raised, I'm sure the barrister will say that you will realize that the benefits far outweigh any public harm. And this is where, you feel this sense of, as a campaigner, oh, I just wish other people were here to say something. This is awful to see. I mean, I don't know what the outcome is going to be of that inquiry. It'd be very, very interesting. But it's great having these policies, but I do feel campaigners need to get more often round the table at these inquiries to test them out.
Jenny, we actually had a point made by, they haven't given the name or the location, but they've said that they made over 200 Regulation 19 representations. I'm not sure where, but of these 0 were accepted. Is that normal? Is this so? These Reg 18 and 19 things, do we need to get better at knowing what they are?
I think I don't know. I mean, all I know is that whenever I've put in anything, it's taken an awfully long time, and you've got to make it rather technical. And if it's just, you've got to make it so that if you're against a big new housing area, for example, you can't just be against it. You've got to argue within the policies. Maybe you're putting in, it's quite complicated. I mean, if you just write, no, we don't want it, as I have seen, I don't think inspectors really care. I have seen, you know, very sadly, a whole load of about 50 people who put in representations walk out of a public inquiry because they were just not considered, which is wrong, but that's what happens, you know. However, yeah.
We continue.
What they did. I mean, I do think it'd be useful to have a pool of people to advise campaigners, because responding to local plans is quite a technical business.
We're going to have to wrap it up soon because we're getting close to 7. But does Transport for New Homes have that kind of literature available, or is there a place where people can go to find out how to get stuck into these local plan documents?
Well, you can read all about it. You know, there's a lot of government guidance on responding to local plans and so on, but it's the time and the technical side of it which I think is difficult for ordinary people to get their heads around. I mean, when I say time, I'm talking about weeks and weeks and weeks participating in these things. It's not just even just going, yeah. So that's why I recommend clubbing together and forming an alliance, and even crowdfunding for some really good technical help on planning and transport. It's the way we won this. I have to show you this. This was the Westbury bypass. Was once something that was won on the public inquiry and ages ago by a very good alliance of different campaigning groups who did pay, they fundraised and paid for not only some excellent technical help, but a planning solicitor. And that is another way forward. You know, I don't underestimate how technical the whole thing is and how little individual protestations count compared to a proper argued case.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll finish up there. But Roger, is there anything you want to add before I say goodbye to everyone, or are you okay?
I will just very quickly get one other question out of the chat, which is the one about is it possible to do good practice? Yes, the answer is absolutely yes, it is. There was a lot of discussion at the conference I've been to earlier today about people do want to have do visions, and there was a planning inspector, recently retired planning inspector, who gave all sorts of examples where she's given permission against local authorities' objections that you haven't provided enough highway capacity, and the developer, who wanted to do the right thing, managed to sort of say that doesn't create severe problems on the road network, and the inspector sort of said, yeah, great. So some good vision stuff does go through. The trouble is that it's still the exception rather than the norm. I think that, yes, the planning system can allow good stuff. The trouble is that it doesn't prevent the bad stuff. And I just made that point earlier today in the conference, that actually the focuses aren't so much about how to enable good practice, it's how to stop bad practice. How to make sure that there are some sticks that focus people's minds on the carrots.
Yeah, okay, that's a hopeful finale. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of the other questions, and the hand that's just gone up on the call as well. Jenny, do you want to sum up by just kind of letting people reminding people how they can find out more about you and the work that you do with your organisation? If
you go to just type in Transport for New Homes into Google, and you can have a look at our website. And we are, there's a lot of blogs and so on. And if you can email us if you need help with campaigns, please email us. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks a million, Jenny. Really grateful to giving up your time, and thanks everyone else that's come along tonight. I'll share the recording of this and the notes and lots of the links that have been talked about in an email to sum everything up. And I'll include the web link to Transport for New Homes as well. It's the least I can do. We do have an event, another webinar coming up pretty soon after Christmas and the New Year. We've got Stephen Frost, who is the former head of transport policy at IPPR, coming on to talk to us about how to communicate the case for traffic reduction effectively to both policymakers and the public. So that should be another great one. I'll put a link to that webinar in the email that goes out to you all. So yeah, as Jenny has said about Transport for New Homes, she's looking for people to get in touch or welcome, and we do at Low Traffic Future as well. So if you think we can help out with anything specifically or especially local campaign groups that are looking for some help, then do drop us a line. Just reply to any of our emails anytime. Thanks a million once again for coming along tonight. We'll be in touch, and yeah, have a great Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jenny. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.